All right, everybody. Once again, I am Scott Storms. I am Water Rights Supervisor at the Western Regional Office of Department of Water Resources. And today, what I plan to go over is start off with an overview of water rights, what a water right is, what it authorizes, what the different components of a water right are. Just because I think there's a lot of people that are involved in the group here that maybe don't have a lot of background in water rights and aren't quite sure what they are. So, and then from there, I'm going to go over kind of just a high level overview of the storage water reservoir components of the upper Salmon River, and then some of the more major ditches that deliver water throughout the Meadows Valley area. And just keep in mind when we go over the ditches, I have not had time to go out with the water master and learn everything and all the intricacies of the system. I'm just going off of right now what I was able to put together and discern from some of our data. And so this is just a high level view. It does not by any means include all the diversions and all the ditches throughout the region, just kind of the more major ones. And so, so with that, let's go to the next slide. So first, what is a water right? Water right is a right to divert public waters and put them to a beneficial use in accordance with one's priority date. Next slide. So definition of what is a Idaho consider public waters. The Idaho Constitution and statutes declare that all waters of the state flowing into natural channels, including waters of natural springs and lakes within their boundaries, and the groundwaters within the state to be public waters. Idaho Constitution and statutes also guarantee the right to appropriate these public waters. And when a private right for use of public waters is established by appropriation, the water right is established and it is real property similar to land ownership. And Idaho law protects those property rights. And just another note that I'll add here too. So typically once a water right is established, that water right then becomes an appurtenance of the land that it is established upon, and typically changes ownership through the exchange of the land that the water right is appurtenant to. Okay, we can go to the next slide. What we'll do now, this is kind of a standard water right report here, one that is just simply for irrigation. And I'm going to walk through the different components of a water right and what makes up a water right. So do the next click. So first is the water right number. And the water right number is basically first number on a water right, the 78. 78 designates the Little Salmon River drainage. So there are, or basin, I should say. There are 53 basins designated throughout Idaho, roughly on about a Huck 4 or 5 level, but it's not specific to that hydrologic unit code, I guess I should say. So they generally describe a particular watershed. And then so the basin number will be the first number on a water right number. And then the next number, the 236 in this case, is a sequential number basically for tracking the the number, the identification. It doesn't necessarily link anything to any other component of the water right. It's simply just an identifier for the water right. Go to the next one. Next is the owner of the water right. An important thing to note here is, as I mentioned earlier, water right ownership tracks along with the land ownership for where it was established. However, water right ownership doesn't automatically change through titling, through title company and deed. So it is a separate process that when somebody buys a piece of property that has water rights pertinent to it, it is on the new landowner to submit a change of ownership to the departments to maintain that that ownership record. So there are multiple cases where somebody owns a piece of property, they do own the water right, but we may not have the current owner of record in our system because that had never been submitted. Doesn't mean that the other person still owns the water right. It is tracked through ownership of the land, so it's just that our records need to be updated. Go to the next one. So one of the large components of a water right is its priority date. The water right doctrine in Idaho is first in time, first in right. So the older the water right, the more senior it is, the more priority it has over other water rights that come after it. In times of water shortages, essentially what happens is all those water rights in an area where there's a water master, one of the duties of that water master is to try and assess how much water is available to be diverted when there's shortages, and then determine, starting with the oldest water right on up, how many water rights can be fulfilled, and essentially curtail all other water rights that are junior to that group of water rights that can still be fulfilled with the available water. Basis is essentially how the water right was established. Without going into too much detail about adjudication, pretty much everything in the western region, and definitely the Little Salmon River, is within the area of the Salmon River, or the Snake River Basin adjudication, which is a long court proceeding period of gathering all the rights, going through court processing to decree all rights within the Snake River Basin. And those rights that went through that process will have a status of decreed. Those that have been applied for and established after that process have gone through a permitting and licensing process, and they will either be in a permit status or they will have a basis of license status, which means that the right has gone through the permitting, gone through a field exam, and has now become a licensed permanent water right. And then the status just means that this is an active valid water right. Go to the next one. Source. Source describes what public waterway it is in its natural source that the water right is diverted from. So the source will either list will always list either the name of the creek or the river or a natural lake or groundwater for those that are from groundwater from wells. In terms of a reservoir, it will always still be the name of the creek that the reservoir impounds. It will not be like in the case of like Cascade Lake, those water rights that are pulled out of Cascade Lake would still be listed as North Fork Payette River. So it's only going to have a lake name if it was a natural lake. Next one. Next is the beneficial use. So this is the use that the right is intended to be used for. Common uses are irrigation, stock water, domestic, commercial, municipal. There are several storage. Irrigation storage is one we'll kind of touch on here in a little bit too. There's a multitude of different uses, and there can be multiple uses on a water right. And there will be different components of the following that will be connected to each one of those uses: the season and the rate and the volume. And each one of them will have their own assigned. But this is the use that the water right was constructed and intended for, the beneficial use being put on the ground for this water right. We'll go to the next one. Next is the period of use, or often referred to as the season of use. This outlines the time of the year that the water right can be utilized. Irrigation has set standards throughout the state for a beginning and end time, and it varies, basically based more on when standard irrigation would need to start and end. In this area, April 1st to October 31st is the standard irrigation season of use. Other water rights, say like a domestic water right and stock water rights, typically are described for year-round use. So those would have a season of use that would be from January 1 to December 31. So the season of use is just, it's the time of year, time period within the year that this water can be put to use. Next is the diversion rate. So this is the rate at which instantaneously at which the water right can be diverted from the natural source. So this is at any time during the season of use, this water right authorizes 0.64 cubic feet per second to be diverted from Goose Creek at its point of diversion. Next one, volume. Now this right, a lot of the surface water rights, especially older decreed rights, did not have a volume assigned to them. And irrigation, a lot of times from surface water, is more set to standards per region based on an acre foot per acre. And I guess I'll go over real quick. So volume is explained in acre feet. And for those who aren't familiar, an acre foot of water is the amount of water it takes to cover 1 acre with a foot of water. And to more familiarize with that, I guess, it essentially equates to 325,851, I believe, gallons in 1 acre foot. So a lot of the surface water rights are restricted more by the standard acre foot per acre volume restrictions for that area. This area, I believe it is 3.5 acre feet per acre. So this right, we'll get down into the acres here in a minute, but you would take the 3.5 acre feet times the acres that the water right is valid for, and that's how much volume it would be assigned per year. We'll go to the next one. Next is our point of diversion. So this is the actual place, the point that this water right is authorized to divert from the natural stream course. Points of diversion and place of use are described down to a 40 acre quarter using the public land survey system. So they don't necessarily describe on the face of the water right exactly where that point is, but we do keep record. We keep through map and through GIS database, more precise points than just 40 acre tracts. But this is the legal description of the point of diversion where this water right can be is to be diverted from. So you can see it's the northwest of the northwest of section 27, township 19 north, range 2 east in Adams County. One thing to note here too, points of diversion are always where the water is diverted from the natural course. So in terms of ditch diversions, like when we get into some of these ditches later, all these water rights, their points of diversion are where the ditch is, and not where they are diverted off of the ditch. So that's sometimes an important thing for people to keep in mind when we're describing a point of diversion for a water right. Next is the place of use. Now, place of use, again, breaks everything down by the quarter, and describes in the terms of irrigation, how many acres are allowed to be irrigated within each quarter. Now, the place of use does describe exactly where that water right is allowed to be utilized, or the land that is to be in terms of irrigation, where it can be irrigated. So in this terms, now the point of diversion on something that gets diverted through a ditch may be a couple 3 miles away if that's where the ditch starts from the natural stream course. But the place of use will actually be described on the ground further down the ditch where the water is actually applied at. So in this water right now, some irrigation rights have what is called a permissible place of use, where there is more acres described in the place of use table than what the right actually authorizes to be irrigated on the ground. And I'll go into that once you hit I think the next one. this was just, sorry, I forgot about my circles. This was just to point out again, how the acres are described within each quarter. So in this water right, in that northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of the section township and range, it authorizes 19 acres of irrigation, and on henceforth for each quarter. Go to the next one. So here now that table adds up to 142 acres, but this right, and we'll point out more how it's described in the conditions later. This right authorizes irrigation within 142 acres worth of area. But if you go to the next one, the acre limit is set at 40 acres. So this right authorizes 40 acres of irrigation within that 142 acres. There's a few different instances where this takes place. It's not on every irrigation water right. Often it's explained this way if there's a set of water, a whole suite of water rights that cover a certain area, or it's also utilized if somebody is going to rotate actual spot of irrigation, not rotating crops, but like they're going to irrigate this particular 40 acres in the 142 acres one year, and then next year that field is fallow and then another 40 acres is irrigated. Those are the two situations where an acre limit comes into play. Let's go to the next one. And then lastly is the conditions on a water right. So conditions on a water right explain things like if it's in a water district, if locking devices and measuring devices are required on the point of diversion, any combined limits that the water right has with other rights. And this one we can see does have that number 4, E56. This right listed below, the rights listed below are limited to the combined total irrigation of 142 acres in a single irrigation season. And then it lists the other rights, and that's where that acre limit comes into play. And more than likely, I haven't looked at this one specifically, but more than likely, those rights there listed add up to the total of the 142 acres as set by the combined use limit. And then number 7 there, the K06, that is then the specific right acre limit for this specific water right. Then this right is limited to the irrigation of 40 acres within the place of use described above in a single irrigation season. Now conditions, there can be multiple other conditions to describe and limit other uses or other restrictions on the water right. But these are, measuring devices and water master control and things like that. Those are some of the more common ones that combined use limits. The next one. So next what I'm going to go over is, since we're going to touch on some storage water rights in the valley, I want to go a little bit into how storage water rights differ from your standard water rights. Hit the next one, I think. Yeah. So the biggest difference is going to be in how they are described in what they are, how they are described in rate and volume. So on-stream water right or on-stream storage water rights for a reservoir do not get a diversion rate because it is an impoundment on the stream and not diverting water off of the stream. So they are described strictly by volume. We can hit the next one. So you can see this is one of the water rights associated with Brundage Reservoir. And it authorizes in a given year 2,992 acre feet of irrigation storage. So that means that this water right allows for that much water to be filled into the reservoir. And then the irrigation from storage is also 2,992 acre feet, which means that that much is also then allowed to subsequently be released from the reservoir for use for irrigation further downstream. Now the total is not additive because it is simply how much is allowed to be stored in the reservoir for it and then subsequently released. So the total total acre feet that this right authorizes is 2,992 acre feet, both for storage and then for later release for irrigation. We'll go to the next one. Yeah. Okay, I don't know. Let's just keep going for time's sake. So next, like I said, I'm just going to be going over some of the more major ditches in the system in the Meadows Valley area. This is an overview of the Upper Salmon Upper Little Salmon River Basin, basically everything from Boulder Creek on up. And then the orange outline outlines Water District 78C, which is currently an active water district with a water master. And there are 3 storage components in the water district. Go to the next slide. And then there are, I can't remember how many ditches that I did pull out, but we'll go through each one of them individually. But what I plan on going through, I just want to give a brief or a broad overview of how much water is authorized to be stored in each one of the storage components of the district. And then all the ditches that most of them are within Water District 78C. Some are listed outside of the district. And I'll go over how many water rights are associated with each and how much water is authorized to be diverted through those ditches. Go to the next one. So the first storage component, first reservoir, Goose Lake, which is on Goose Creek. There's 3 water rights associated with Goose Creek or Goose Lake. And those water rights authorize a total storage of 6,550 acre feet in one season, in 1 year. Next one. Next is Twin Lakes, which is a natural lake. I'm not exactly familiar myself with how the impoundment structure works, but it is impounding a natural lake. So the source is actually listed as Twin Lakes, and that authorizes a storage volume of 700 acre feet. And that's 700 acre feet in addition to the natural volume of the lake. Next one. And then lastly, we have Brundage Reservoir, which is an impoundment of Brundage Creek. So again, the source is Brundage Creek. And it also has 3 water rights associated with it and authorizes the total storage volume of 6,875 acre feet in a year. So now we'll walk through just, again, this is not the entirety. I've not had time to go out with the water master to visit the entire system. I'm hoping that we're going to have time to do that, it probably won't be till spring at this point. But so I know that there are several ditches that are not included in this, but I just want to give a, kind of a high-end view of some of the major diversions. So I'll start off with Camel Ditch, which is the biggest one basically in the valley. It is sourced from Goose Creek. It is within Water District 78C. There are a total of 49 water rights listed with Campbell Ditch as their point of diversion. And the total authorized rate during the irrigation season that can be diverted down the ditch from natural flow is 77.76 CFS. Next one. Next is the South End Ditch, which is sourced from Goose Creek. It is also in Water District 78C, has a total of 36 water rights associated, and has a total authorized rate of 35.25 CFS. We can go to the next one. So some of these names are just what we have kind of in our data set. If there are other local names that people are more familiar with, I'd be open to using them, because some of them I think are just lists of the original families that owned water rights on these ditches. So this is, I've more been referring to it as the White Jennings et al. Ditch, but White, Jennings, Abshire, Moore, Mitchell, Snyder Canal, sourced from Goose Creek. water district. It is within the water district 78C. There are 50 water rights associated and 23.45 CFS authorized down this ditch. And one point on this one, you can see there's a little discrepancy on our point of diversion versus I pulled these flow lines from the National Hydrography data set. So I have not had a chance to get out there and ground truth this. I think I have a feeling there's more truth in where our point of diversion is maybe than the National Hydrography data set, but I didn't want to make any corrections. So if that looks funny, that's kind of why. Next one. Then next is Estabrook Bride and Looney Canal and the Wilson Ditch from Campbell's Swamp. And another thing here where I'm unfamiliar yet at this time with everything going on with this particular ditch system. It looks like they are connected, and maybe some of the local water users here know more about it, I'm sure. But when we go through these individually, go to the next one, the first one. So the Estabrook Bride and Looney Canal, it is sourced from Goose Creek. It is within the water district 78C. It is authorized for there's 26 water rights associated with it. And it has a total diversion rate of 12.67 CFS. Now the next one, go to the next slide, the Wilson Ditch from Campbell Swamp. Source is actually listed as Campbell Swamp, which tells me there must be some natural marsh or swamp source for this ditch. It is not considered within the water district. And there are only 2 water rights associated for 4.46 CFS. Next one. Next, we'll move into Big Creek, a little further up the valley. And we have the Riggs Wyman and the Arthur Folsom ditches. Go to the next one. Right. You hit one more. Oh, go back, I guess. Sorry. Thought I had little circles. I think you can just go. There we go. Maybe that. Well, anyways. So the one on the west side or the left side of the screen there is the Riggs Wyman ditch. It is sourced from Big Creek. It is in Water District 78A, which is currently listed as an inactive water district, which means there's not a current water master. This is something I want to touch base with on the water master, though. I'm not 100% right now if he has been managing this or not for the water master for 78C. But it has 9 water rights associated and a total authorized rate of 14.13 CFS. Next one. Next is the Arthur Folsom ditch. It is also sourced from Big Creek, also within 78A. And this one has 23 water rights associated at a total diversion rate of 6.10 CFS.
And what ditch is it?
Oh, sorry, it's the one on the right on the east side. The other one is that's coming in from the top. There is the south end ditch. Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd added circles and maybe they got lost in saving processes. But all right, we can go to the next one. And then I think this is the last one that I have called out. This is the west side ditch, and this one is actually diverted directly from the Little Salmon River. It is not within the water district, and this one has a total of 15 water rights associated with the point of diversion for a total of 8.95 CFS. So this last slide is just kind of an overview. Again, that initial slide I had pulling out all the ditches and all of the storage components. And I see I did miss a save on this because I had Brundage Reservoir labeled, but anyways. And then essentially just tables that describe each ditch, what we just went over, and also each one of the reservoirs. I did not total the diversion rates on each ditch per source or anything like that, because I feel like at this point that's a little misleading, because this is not a total for the valley or for each creek. It is just a representation of some of the ditches, some of the more major ditches that I was able to pull out for this purpose. So, and then there was one last component I was going to go over to make people aware of. We hit the next. And that is that there is a minimum stream flow right that is established on the Little Salmon River. It was established by the Idaho Water Resource Board. The priority date on it, I guess my pointer doesn't do, well, let me use this. As I realize the glow pointer is not going to do any good for anybody online. So priority date is April 1st, 2005, which means that although this does establish minimum flows within the stream, any right that has a priority date prior to this is still senior to this water right. So it would not be subordinate, it would not be subjected to curtailment due to this water right. A lot of these minimum stream flow rights throughout the state, they fluctuate throughout the year, which is why you can see under the beneficial use, season of use, and diversion rate, it changes basically on this one every month. And if we go into, I can click here, the conditions on the water right, the way that these are established, the rates per month are established on 80% exceedance flows as for those given months, which means that 80% of years that month, the flow hits that. I'm trying to remember if I'm explaining this right now. It hits that flow rate 80% of years. And I might have to recheck my definition on that again. There is also an accounting condition on this, which allows for future allocation of water, which is this number 5 here. So what essentially this means is an additional 52.7. So I'll read it, I guess, first. This water right is subordinate to future non-domestic commercial, municipal, and industrial developments. So in the amount of up to 52.7 CFS based on 25% of the lowest unimpaired meridian monthly flow or amount available above a base flow, which is equivalent to the unimpaired monthly 80% exceedance flow, whichever is less. And then it goes on to these exceedance flows, which are exactly what we're lined out up above. So essentially what that's saying too is that we do have a tracking system for the Little Salmon River drainage to where, since this was initiated, another 52.7 CFS can be appropriated for uses besides the domestic, commercial, municipal, and industrial, without, and those new water rights would essentially still be considered senior to this water right if they're within that accounting, that prior to meeting that 52.7. Once another 52.7 CFS is allocated within the drainage, any subsequent water right would be subject to curtailment per the minimum stream flow right. So I guess I'll just put one more here. So I guess essentially that was probably a lot of information for a lot of people. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I wanted to throw out some useful websites that maybe we can post somewhere on the collaborative site or something too. But I guess at that, I'll open it up for questions.
First question.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on decree water?
Decreed. So
I was little, I wasn't following.
yeah. So the decree means it's gone through an adjudication process. So the entire Snake River Basin, anything that's tributary to the Snake River, went through about a 20-year-long adjudication process, which is where the state essentially is trying to tally all water rights that were both either through a permit and licensing process or established through beneficial use, which is a lot of these older water rights were initially established through beneficial use, essentially just by somebody developing it and putting the water to use. And never actually did we have official record of those. And so it is a lengthy court proceeding essentially where people everybody is supposed to submit claim that I have a water right. It was either submitted because I have this, this license that I established through the state, or because somebody 70, 80, 100 years ago established use on this ground. And this is the evidence that I have. And then it was a long proceeding. It's actually happening in North Idaho right now, those drainages that aren't tributary to the Snake River. And it was basically a tally to get all the water rights recognized. And then through court decree, established that yes, you do have a water right. These are the elements of the water right. You do have, so it has been through court proceedings. It is secured that yes, you have established this use, and this use is now a permanent water right on that piece of property. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So then on those water rights, how do they establish the data priority on those?
It's through showing evidence of sometimes historical documents, usually some sort of historical documents. A lot of those older ones, they used record of the BLM. What's it called again when you establish your homestead? So homestead surveys. So when the property was originally homesteaded, and any other historical documents that they can come up with that say, hey, this was homesteaded here. A lot of times the stock water use can especially be, attributed to the date of homestead, of the establishment of the homestead. And then the irrigation, a lot of it's also just through affidavit of, those who may have been around, or at least have been around. So that's another thing I guess I could put up here too, or put up to the group is some links to the adjudication process. It's complete in our region, so but it's through some historical evidence that use was established there at that time. Yeah.
Just check for the historical data establishing that was all through the adjudication process.
Yes. Yeah.
That was during the adjudication where we established that part of the
Yes. I guess, yeah, I was just asking, if it was all through the adjudication process, and that's in the historical data. And what was the rest of your question, I guess, again? Yeah.
I have one other question, just curious. I remember years ago when the first started, there's some real issues in the valley with the rights and phones and that.
I believe that was. So Al's question is if the minimum stream flow was part of that. I think it's commonly referred to as the Nez Perce Agreement, which was an agreement through the net with the Nez Perce tribe and the state to try and establish certain water rights for the Nez Perce tribe, including some of these minimum stream flows that were established for fish purposes. And we were having a little bit of trouble tracking down the specifics of it because it's not well recorded what was and wasn't established as part of the Nez Perce Agreement, but I'm pretty sure that minimum stream flow right was was a piece of the Nez Perce Agreement through the adjudication. I don't know if I can. Oh, go ahead, Stacy. Yeah.
I have
Stacy?
a couple questions.
Sure.
The first question, establish minimum stream flow, is that just in the Little Salmon River, or does that include the tributaries and it's just combined, i.e. Goose Creek, for example, or 6 Mile Creek? Those are both tributaries of the Little Salmon River. And do those have to show minimum stream flows with respect to what that 2005 water right reflected?
Yes, the tributaries upstream of the minimum stream flow reach are still a part of the accounting system. So new water rights established on tributaries also get accounted for in that 57.2 or 52.7 CFS available for that under the water right.
Okay, my second question, with respect to water rights and use Goose Lake would be an example, in Brundage Reservoir. Obviously, those reservoirs were built at a later date. How does the water from those reservoirs affect water rights that might have been established before the implementation or the building of the reservoirs? In other words, which water rights would take priority over one or the other?
You know, that's something I might have to discuss a little bit more with the water master as far as how it's supposed, you know, the water rights that utilize the storage water should have an irrigation from storage component on the rights as well. But that's not always how it's operated in every water district. So, you know, so for downstream, you know, if it wasn't created after the establishment of those reservoirs, then in order to irrigate with water from those reservoirs, they should, well, let's see here. I got to think this through again, because the water rights themselves also have a place of use. The storage water rights also have a place of use. So they can actually, it kind of varies actually, and I haven't dug into how these ones actually are set up, because some of them are set up through like a distribution entity, and I think like Brundage Water Users Association. I know that one had a larger place of use that covered a large portion of the valley. In which case, you know, those that hold, sometimes it is broke out through shares, similar to an irrigation district or irrigation company, and those that hold shares in it can then irrigate if they fall within the greater water rights place of use. And I think that's how some of these are established.
Well, the reason why I asked is some of these water rights were established before the building of these reservoirs. You know, we've got active water rights that were established in 1884.
Yeah.
Which was for the building of both, you know, certainly Brundage and I believe even Goose Lake. So
yeah, I'm
wanting to understand which takes priority, the reservoir water rights or the water rights, the natural stream flow water rights.
Well, the natural stream flow water rights are going to take priority. But I think typically these storage rights are able to be filled, you know, prior to, you know, water getting too low to supply the natural stream flow rights further downstream. And I believe the way it's been run up here, a lot of those older water rights also have access through the place of use described on the the reservoir rights to utilize some of that storage water once the natural flow gets too low to supply their water rights. So, does that help answer your question, or some of
Yeah,
you know,
somewhat. I mean, yeah, it gives me some direction, I guess. It didn't fully answer it, but the gist of what you're saying is as long as there's water available on those early water rights, because we're not the only ones that own some of those earliest water rights. As long as there's water available, whether it's stored in Brundage or Goose Lake, the natural stream flow owners of those water rights still would take priority over as long as there's water available, even in storage. That's kind of what I'm gathering you're saying, or is that?
well, I guess to put a little more simply is typically those reservoirs are filled when there's enough water for everybody. You know, in the springtime is when they're filling up. So there's no curtailments taking place. Later as the year goes on, those more senior water rights, so that water, once it's filled into the reservoir, is considered fully appropriated. So now that water right has been filled. And the only thing that they can be done with it now is use the water stored in them for the irrigation from storage. So, so they can't call upon the water stored in the reservoir. Those natural stream flow rights that predate the water rights on the reservoirs can't call on the water that's in the reservoirs because it's already been fully appropriated at that point. The volume's been appropriated for the season for that storage water right. But they can call upon any other junior direct stream flow water rights and essentially curtail them. But then if those junior water rights also have access to the storage water, they could then utilize the storage water to irrigate their ground rather than their direct flow. Is that?
Thank you.
Okay. It gets it gets complicated, and it's something I need to dive into more with the water master to decipher exactly how this system is managed with the storage water rights in comparison with direct flow diversion water rights. But and that's something I'm planning on sitting down with him soon to get more straight on. So hopefully I can have better answers to that respect soon. Wes?
When you were showing those pictures with tables, and it shows like what's being able to, there's a lot coming out of Goose Lake. So you have multiple, groups of people on water rights on multiple versions. And I was just curious, what is, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm kind of thinking, it looks like the tally to roughly 50 CFS. Is that what I'm remembering right? Or maybe it was more.
Yeah, there was dependent on the ditch, but yeah.
But I'm thinking like a little salmon in a hot year get below salmon. That's coming in with I think the USGS station's down pretty low, so probably a boulder hazard and all those. And so that is probably that Goose Creek, I guess to use the right term, is over allocated, meaning that it can be taken to zero.
Well, and that's where you start curtailing water rights as the water goes down. Yeah, it's all based on what water is available. But yeah, I mean, it's
say this question again.
So Wes's question was basically, essentially comes down to the fact that a lot of these total diversion rates equate to more than what the stream is even flowing at certain times of year. That's part of how the priority date works. But so when water gets low, junior rights get curtailed, and only those that are senior up to the date of the total can be diverted from the stream are able to be delivered their water. Is the process that, how it's supposed to work. And yes, I mean, because of the way some of these water rights were established, there is, the entire stream could potentially be diverted. I don't think that's the way it's often been managed here. I think the storage component is part of how they've been able to maintain without doing that. Oftentimes too, like you look at Campbell ditch, I think it had 77 CFS authorized to be diverted down it. I don't think that's often diverted all at once. I think, again, these are some of the questions that I need to go over with the water master and discuss more with him to determine better on how the systems really ran, how much is, you know, diverted at any given time, and how much and when the storage component really starts to come into play, and how that works. So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, there are lots of areas throughout the state where entire streams are diverted. There's a section of the Snake River down in southern Idaho where the entire river is diverted and basically springs back up in the Thousand Springs area. Right.
Is it,
So
in this water district, is it a regular occurrence for junior users' rights to be curtailed, or is there typically enough water for all rights?
again, the question was if water rights are commonly curtailed in this district, and I don't think so. Again, it's something I need to discuss with the water master more, and how often rights have to be curtailed. I think they've come up with a way of kind of balancing things out, especially with the storage component. But it's something I still need to sit down with the water master and discuss in more detail.
It's kind of just curious, is there like a standard for record keeping on how the water's managed? Like I understand with the water rights, that's pretty dialed in.
Yeah.
As far as the distribution or how it's implemented.
Yeah, so there is a report that the water master submits every year. It's basically reports how much water was diverted for each water right at each point of diversion. I haven't seen this year's yet. I haven't had time to actually sit down and dig through all those for this area yet either, but there is a reporting that the water master supplies at the end of every irrigation season.
To sort of touch on Gary's point too, on at the point of diversion of POD, like what is required at that point? Like, you know, when you go up, you see there's a wheel and, you know, it's supposed to be locked, I think, but you know, is there a staff gauge requirement? Is there a flow gauge requirement? Or like what's required so if you some of them are pretty specific, right? It's like, I'm just gonna use example 20.8.01 or something like
Yeah.
that. How do you know at the POD?
Well, you know, most of these should have some measuring device if they're in a water district. And I'm not exactly sure how the measuring devices are set up on this system. A lot of times in ditches, it's a weir. So it may not be right there at the head gate. It might be a little further downstream, just as long as for the first, you know, diversions come out of the ditch. That's essentially what
That's how they're set up.
it's weirs.
Just
Yeah.
below.
Yeah.
And we just tune it until we get it to the right allocation. And then most of the time, the water master comes, does that job.
Yeah, that's the main.
Specifically with the start of the season, so that everybody gets the exact amount. And then when there's an abundance, then it gets a little bit looser, but he's the one that manages that.
Is it a staff gauge, like actual or is it mark, or what does it look like?
It's a metal trap that's got a little level, as a wall. Just a single mark above that.
So someone's correlated at some point to CFS or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, if you looked up measurement weirs, you see like, it's basically has to do with how much water has, you know, how much head is built up behind the weir, and then that critical flow going over top of the weir, and a measurement of the depth of that critical flow over as it's going over the top. And then there should have been, you know, prior measurements taken to correlate exactly how many CFS that equates to. So.
So there's, from my understanding, there's 52 CFS still available that people can file on.
Well, before they would become subordinate to that minimum stream flow right. So that 52 CFS, which I don't know exactly where it's at yet. I think because there's been some that's been, allocated since 2005, but I think there's still at least 30 or so left. Once that number is hit, then that means that minimum stream flow can then curtail any rights after that if the minimum stream flow rates are not being met in the little salmon.
Not safe for agricultural use, it's only industrial.
So those are the ones that are excluded from it, actually, and I maybe should have clarified that more. So
I guess we'll.
commercial, so anything except commercial, industrial, municipal, and domestic. Domestic, anyways, those are the four. Those four actually are not subject to the minimum stream flow right. So domestic, commercial, municipal, and industrial are actually not subject. So any of those developments would not be subject to it in any way. That's another condition that's on that right. So if you develop for, say, the city of New Meadows applies for another water right for municipal use, that municipal use would not be subject to the minimum stream flow right.
What does that mean? Sort of like not subject to that mean?
It means that water right does not have any power to curtail it.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Same thing with groundwater. Groundwater not curtailed.
I have to look at that one a little deeper. Some of them, groundwater does get curtailed. Don't believe this one. I don't believe this one. I don't believe groundwater is subordinate to this one, but I'd have to dig into that a little deeper again. I'll take a look into that. Definitely not for domestic, domestic, a groundwater domestic would not be subject to curtailment from it. Yeah.
No, we don't have much irrigation.
I don't understand.
I don't, and I looked at that a little bit. I think it is mostly surface water, but there is some, there is some, I think it's more on smaller pieces of property though. Where people have groundwater source, but it's something I could look into as well too,
So on point of diversion, if a person downstream has, so like let's take the South End ditch for example. So somebody that is downstream from my farm on the South End ditch has a 500 inch water right on that ditch. You turn in 500 inches at the top end of the point of diversion. Are they expected to get 500 inches, or what is their what do you factor in for loss?
Well, that's another bit of a question I'll have to talk to the water master about, but yeah, conveyance losses can become a problem, can become an issue because especially, I know it's been discussed in the collaborative here earlier about, ways to be more efficient with water. And that can become a problem on a ditch system when somebody isn't needing as much water. We start to have less conveyance down the ditch now. And so it's definitely an issue that needs to be considered because not more water is supposed to be diverted down the ditch than what is authorized by the water rights associated with the ditch. So oftentimes, like if there is a transfer where somebody's moving a water right off of the ditch, there might be a condition that X amount of flow needs to say associated with the ditch for conveyance. And I can't really condition a water right that way when you're just increasing your efficiencies and not needing as much water. But again, I guess, that water is still authorized to be diverted down the ditch. So I think there's still wiggle room there to allow that enough water to be diverted down the ditch for, conveyance purposes. If somebody is, more efficient, say several people have gotten more efficient through installing pivots or something. and somebody down at the end is still on flood irrigation, there still would be enough authorized down the ditch to divert enough to get to him. So
So then
it's
we-
kind of,
so basically we'd have to send enough water down the ditch. So let's say an end user at the end of the ditch had 100 inches, uses that ditch, flows about 500-600 inches of water.
mhm.
We'd still have to send 500 or 600 inches of water down that ditch to get the 100 inches down to the end user.
Well, you probably wouldn't have to send the full amount anymore. I mean, it would be a kind of a game of determination of how much still needs to be diverted down the ditch in order to get it to that end user, to get his full allotment, if he's using the full amount. So if a lot of people have come up with more efficient systems along the ditch, still a portion of their water right is probably going to have to be utilized for conveyance, but probably not the full,
So a part of my water rights, if I'm upstream from them, would have to be utilized to convey the water to the next.
I mean, it works through the authorization of your water right. You're not really giving up a piece of your water right to do that. It's just that ditch is authorized to convey this much water in part because of your water right. So that's one way the game can be played to continue to get water down to that person. But I know that has been a concern and issue in some of the areas like in the Lemhi Upper Salmon where they have, increased efficiencies through pivots and everything else. And yet you still got somebody at the end of a system that, does have flood irrigation still. I think that's one way. I'm pretty sure that's one way it's been handled in the past is, the ditch still, even though people aren't using as much, it's still authorized to have that much diversion through it. So we just find the right amount that can still be authorized to divert through the ditch, but not as much as used to be essentially, and still get that person their water.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Scott, what would be like your prescription or like next steps for understanding the water rights in this area? What would you recommend for that group?
Well, one of them is probably on me to spend more time with the water master to get a better understanding of the system, and I guess, it's already been talked about trying to find more efficient systems to perhaps allow more water to stay in the system. I think there was a concern brought up last time about what happens with the storage components. And I was planning on addressing that too, because I think the concern was, well, if we're not using as much water, what happens to those storage water rights? And essentially what happens is they'll just hold more carryover. It's referred to carryover water. So those reservoirs just would remain a little more full over the season. And then that would be less that has to, that it takes to fill them the subsequent season. Yeah, obviously I'm going to work a little more, getting to know the area, getting to know the diversions and this how the system functions with the water master. And I guess then, as a group, just trying to get more water users involved and finding ways to work with them to achieve the goals. So, yeah. Al?
I've got one question, just, I'd like to bring it this way. I believe there's a conservation pool in
Yep.
there. And when have that work with you?
So, yeah, there's our other rights involved with Brundage Reservoir, and I think it might be listed as an aesthetic use. The one you might be, because I noticed that one. I didn't include that one because I was just addressing irrigation, but that further adds to the volume allowed to be stored in the reservoir. And that essentially then allows, every year, however many acre feet that aesthetic use is good for, it can be filled up and retained in the reservoir. And that one's probably for the entire year. So basically, I think that's for like, if you went up there now and saw what's in there, that's probably covered under the aesthetic use.
Actually, one question.
Yeah.
About stock water.
Yeah.
Is there any stock water rights out of Brundage?
There are for, I think there's stock water, but there's no stock water from storage. So that means the stock water is supposed to be just directly from the reservoir itself and not
Oh,
diverted.
got it. So
Yeah.
you can't convey it down.
I don't, there's,
Stock water.
I don't believe there was. Pretty sure there wasn't any stock water
So
for
it's all
storage.
stock water you get,
Natural flow essentially. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. All right. Thanks.